Welcome. So you have myself, Mike Walker, with Microsoft, and David Havera with GE Aviation. Now, full disclosure, we've got about 60, 70 minutes worth of content we're compressing in 30 minutes. So we're going to go a little fast, but this is meant to be an interactive conversation. So if you've got questions, raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have. Okay? Sound like a plan? All right, perfect. So we're going to be talking about blockchain consortiums. How many of you know what blockchain consortiums are? A couple. Good. So we're going to go into a little bit of 101, what consortiums are, and why we think it's important for more enterprise-grade applications, something you might not be hearing too much about. So from a market perspective, Microsoft is tracking the market on the momentum behind these consortiums. So overall, we see blockchain spending all up starting to boom, but also this notion of private permissioned blockchains that are used by companies that want to have a set of trusted partners within a closed ecosystem really starting to boom. And so this is just another type of application of blockchain technology. While you still have a lot of the common benefits of the technology platform, the raw capabilities, but it's used in more of a permissioned way. And so you can see a doubling year over year of these consortiums happening in the marketplace. And so we're tracking over 70 of these consortiums worldwide. And so we're involved in various different capacities from a Microsoft perspective. But if you look at the blockchain Azure service, we've actually got hundreds of customers on our blockchain platform today. Companies like Starbucks that are taking bean to barista, where they want to be able to, in their consortium, to be able to track a coffee bean all the way to their coffee shop. Or 3M, where they want to combat counterfeit pharmaceutical drugs. Where here in the United States, 80% of the drugs that are sold from overseas are counterfeit. It's a $200 billion business for the bad guys. Imagine being able to reap some of that ROI for the good guys, right? And so what 3M is doing is they've got a blockchain solution. Essentially, they've created a consortium called Double Trust, where they're able to, with QR codes, very simple technology on a pill bottle, be able to track that drug from the manufacturer all the way through to it gets to that shelf on Walgreens. So you as a consumer could scan that and know that this is authentic. And likewise, 3M wants to understand that as well. Imagine if you're a company like Chipotle, who remembers the problems with their food quality. Imagine being able to track that in real time. This is the power of these blockchain consortiums, is that the already established B2B relationships you have within your ecosystem, you can start to use blockchain technology to break down those barriers. Now, if you listen to analyst firms like Gartner, what they'll tell you is over the next 5 years, we're going to see almost $180 billion of impact, financial impact for companies around this technology, and even larger over the next decade. So you're seeing a gradual hockey puck type of acceleration, hockey stick acceleration here of this technology. So a lot of what you're hearing about today is more of the permissionless stuff. We're not going to be talking too much about that. Okay? This is one architectural pattern. We're going to be talking about the permissioned. So having this architecture where I can optimize my supply chains so that I can reduce costs, efficiencies. Think about what we're doing with blockchain as creating an ecosystem database for our partners. Where today with relational databases, because oftentimes we're asked, well, why don't you just use a relational database? It's because relational databases were built for individual companies. When you've got an environment where you've got many companies participating within an ecosystem, having one central source of trust is absolutely critical, especially as you hear GE Aviation, what they're going to talk about around their aviation supply chain. Imagine having a supply chain where you've got 22,000 independent data points. That's a lot to track. There's a lot of errors that can be had in that supply chain. What we're finding is no industry is immune. So, like I said, with those various different types of customers that we deal with on a daily basis, we see that every industry is participating in these blockchain consortiums in one way or another, ranging from the pharmaceutical example I gave you, to Starbucks, to the aviation industry, to airlines, the work that we're doing with Singapore Air, with the Chris Flyer loyalty program, or the project that we have with Emirates around tracking parts, very similar to what you're going to hear from GE Aviation. Likewise with Air New Zealand, where we're doing additive manufacturing processes, being able to, in real time, 3D print a part that we know is genuine, that the design is genuine because it's on the blockchain. Now, with these consortiums, there's a lot of variability. And so what I want to stress to all of you, as you're looking at these consortiums and using this technology, is focus on the business problem first. And the most common challenge that I see with companies is, especially the older, more established companies, is they want to optimize a 30-year-old business process and try to digitize it using blockchain. Wrong move. Don't do that. Actually take the time to take a step back to understand the new capabilities that these technologies are providing you. What new and interesting things can you do with these particular capabilities, especially as we're entering an age where we're in this peer-to-peer economy. And David's going to be talking a little bit about those aspects and how they've implemented that at GE. So you could see here that there's models like a founder-led model, where you've got one company that wants to control the ecosystem. It's almost blockchain software as a service. To an industry-driven model where you've got that founder and a close set of partners in that ecosystem. So an example of this would be the Microsoft royalties platform. So with Xbox, what we've done with our royalty payment platform is we've opened up how we expose royalties to game developers. So now, Nintendo, Sony, Apple, it doesn't matter who you are, you can join one common consortium. And you wouldn't believe, I didn't know this until I actually engaged with our finance folks, but still today, there's Excel files being passed back and forth between these companies. And there's 3 different sources of truth. There's what the technology tells us, which is the truth. There's the Excel file that the accountants are using. And then there's the Microsoft version. And this would take us to audit 2 months to audit a particular transaction. So with this solution, what we've done is now we've got real-time auditing. We've cut our operations staff in half, and we're saving $2 million a year. So when you look at it from an ROI perspective, it's just phenomenal. And now when you expand that out to, let's say, an Ubisoft or an EA Games, et cetera, where now they can have their own nodes within their trusted infrastructure, and they can run their own reporting and not be dependent on Microsoft, it opens up a whole new wave of capabilities. Now, what you'll find with all these business models is sometimes your company will say, we're going to do a mixture of different business models for the different problem that I'm trying to solve. Sometimes, and the most common pattern, is you'll start with a founder-led model, and you'll evolve to either a partnership-driven model or an industry-driven model. Because in a founder-driven model, it's easier to get agreement by one company than try to get agreement by 20 companies, okay? Now, the reason why we want to establish the business model is because when you build these consortiums, there's many moving parts that you have to start to define. Everything from understanding what are the specific scenarios in which we're going to enable, the governance model, the legal structure. Are we going to spin this up as a JV, a joint venture? Are we going to set it up as a new co? Are we going to do an MOU where it's just a partnership agreement between 2 or 3 companies? There's many different options, and I lovingly say this: the know people in the room, the lawyers and the accountants and the regulators and such, they're going to be asking these questions of you whenever you're trying to establish these. Yes. It depends on the business model. So if you are in this will go back. If you're in a founder-led model, the MOU bit is the most common. If you're in a partnership-driven model, it's usually a joint venture model. If you're in an industry-driven model, usually you set up an entirely new company and you establish that as an independent entity, and then you create a board structure. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And
I find that last one, the greatest applications can be made when you have like an industry setting up a new company, or do you think that smaller, maybe more partnership-driven models are more okay?
it depends on the business problem that you're trying to solve. I would say the more transformative, when you're going into a new business model area that hasn't been defined yet, absolutely. This industry-driven model and this innovation-driven model is going to provide the most impact. If you're within a highly regulated industry where you've got guardrails that you cannot change, then you're going to get more value out of these other two. And so those are the immovable objects that you just can't move because it requires the government to say, yes, we can do that. Does that make sense? Okay. And so, does your guys' head hurt yet? I mean, this is a lot that you have to address. There's a lot of business constituents that you've got to get in the room. So you might have been expecting to be at a blockchain conference, and I'm talking, close to 80% of this conversation is a business conversation. Okay? And so when you move into this style of architecture with blockchain, you're going to find that the majority of this conversation is a soul-searching activity with your business partners. There's a lot of ideation that has to occur. And so that leads me to how we approach this. So from a Microsoft perspective, we've got our blockchain strategy and planning playbook. And essentially, this is a repeatable and predictable way in which when we engage with these large companies like GE Aviation and others, where we're able to help them figure out the answers to those very hard questions. And you'll notice by ideating first and understanding those business cases and those business models, it's a funneling effect. So what you're going to find is, as you start to peel away and understand those models, the questions and answers get a whole lot easier downstream. So the most common thing that I run into with business executives is they don't know what they don't know. And so a large part of this is us as technologists educating them, but also facilitating ideation sessions, figuring out what are the quick hit opportunities, but also what are some of the moonshots that we want to try to accomplish. And so a common 2x2 that I'll draw for clients on a big whiteboard like that back there is level of strategic value to your strategy and the value potential of blockchain technology. And we're looking for things in that top right-hand corner. So things that add the most strategic value to your 3 to 5 year strategy and where blockchain can provide the most value to you. Yes, sir, did you have a question?
Oh, yeah, I was just going to ask, are there common pushback points or misconceptions you see when you present these initiatives?
I'm going to hold that question for David because he's actually within the trenches, and I think he's probably got a good answer for you. Okay. So what you're seeing is very much an open innovation-based approach. So using design thinking principles, we've got this minimum viable ecosystem buzzword that we like to use here where we want to distill down to fit-for-purpose blockchain consortium implementations. So the next big piece here is understanding your blockchain business model. Okay? All those big components that we talked about, this is where you start to define that. And lastly, architecture. This is where we actually create the architecture. You'd be surprised that while we are building prototypes throughout the entire process, we don't get to the architecture phase to the last phase here. And that's by design. Because what you'll find is your governance mechanisms, your architecture choices around consensus, et cetera, are all dependent on those more macro business questions that we have to answer first. What we find with customers is there's a lot of backtracking when they don't do that. And there's a lot of political capital that's spent that doesn't need to be spent because they didn't do the right stepwise approach. Now, this is very high level and very deliberately for a 30-minute conversation, but come on, you can do it. There we go. There's a lot underneath the covers, okay? There's a lot that we go through with customers from the business model envisioning, where we're actually building out economic models on how we can monetize, not only do the cost savings, but also how we create a monetization model around our blockchain consortiums, okay? Everything from our transformation plan and our governance strategy and all the different artifacts in which we'll use. You can take pictures all you guys want. It's not confidential, and I can talk to you guys after the session as well and go in deeper here. And since we only have 30 minutes, I do want to pass the baton to my good friend David to talk about the GE Microsoft partnership. There you go, sir.
All right, thank you. You guys hear me okay? So this goes forward.
You want to flip it that way?
Flip it, okay. All right, my name is David Havera. I work at GE Aviation. I work within a business unit of that's called GE Aviation Digital Services, and we actually sell software to the aviation industry. So we'll talk about that. Level set, I'll take about 10 minutes of your time. We have a ton of domain experience. We've been in the industry selling aircraft years back, and we've also been packaging solutions together for our customers. So pretty exciting stuff. We have a team of 700 people strong around the world. We own over 100 patents. In addition, the team that I roll up under is within the innovation group. So we have incubators around the world. And really our whole mantra is we'll go in with a team of aviation experts and we'll say, how can we help you improve a process? And then here's a digital solution that we can recommend for that. Our vision for the business is really what we want to be, kind of thinking from a farm to table example. We want to be able to track the ore from when it leaves the earth to when we use that ore and manufacture an engine, to when that engine ships, to when that engine goes on wing at a customer, to how that engine performs, to when that engine gets repaired and when it re-enters the service. We want a complete ecosystem of that, of connected data. We have products that help with that. We have a digital twin. We do additive 3D printing. We actually have a business unit totally around that. We have the team of data scientists that I mentioned from a predictive analytics and machine learning standpoint. And then we do blockchain, which is what I'm going to talk about today since this is a blockchain conference. All right, so just, blockchain works in aviation because there's so many disparate data sources. This is a bit of an eye chart. I don't expect the people in the back to see it. But the one thing that we are facing into now is kind of this renaissance of digital is that if we can drive industry collaboration across all our disparate data systems, which is what we believe blockchain to enable, then we're going to have a whole new level of productivity that we've ever experienced in the past. So now to the really exciting stuff after we've kind of level set. The way that we solve problems in the aviation industry is that we use manufacturing paradigms, and we've thought about that and applying it to software. But just the example on the right up there, we have a new product that's coming into service. And when a new engine launches, it's a pretty big event. We don't replace engines it's probably every 30 or 40 years that it happens. And you replace them and you upgrade them, like the LEAP engine, it does regional flights. So most likely if you're flying within the US, you could have ridden on an airplane that flew that, but it has 15% fuel efficiency. In addition, it can facilitate a 25-minute turn time at an airport. But the demand for that engine when it was released in 2017 was so big that by 2020, we have to get 4 times better in our supply chain to meet that customer output. And in order to do that, we use a framework that's called Lean and Six Sigma that's been in the manufacturing community for years. So Lean started with Toyota in the 50s, and the whole premise around that is how do I eliminate waste from my process? And then Six Sigma is about how do I eliminate defects? And then those got combined together in the early 2000s. But the paradigm that we've defined with Microsoft is that we need to drive collaboration to hit our goals on the LEAP engine. So we use Lean and Six Sigma to improve a process. Then we stack blockchain embedded into it to drive collaboration, because we know we're not going to hit our goals without collaborating across the table and across the lines with people, customers, competitors that we haven't driven a level of collaboration to that in the past. So that's what blockchain is to us and kind of our vision and how we think about it. So next I'll talk about just a couple of use cases that we're actively working on and service offerings that we have. And the first one is, again, it's kind of the traceability piece that I talked to from the ore in the earth all the way through to when that part is on an aircraft in the air. And really what we're trying to do is create a Carfax report. So you guys see commercials with the Carfax, but there's a really lack of, with all the disparate data that we have, it's really hard to understand the complete history of an aircraft engine or a part on that. And ironically, this was news to me, airplanes and engines are liquid assets. So they will change the owners several times over their 20 to 30 year life. So whenever you have a liquid asset, documentation is extremely important. So this is kind of an industry issue that we're facing into, where GE Aviation has a warehouse in Texas where we have tens of millions of dollars of parts collecting dust because we don't have the right paperwork and we can't put those back into the. So this is an example of where blockchain can succeed, where Mike kind of showed the founder-led, the industry-led. Blockchain will definitely succeed in an industry-led, facing into a problem that everyone can get better from. And parts availability is really kind of the pull that everyone wants, more engines flying quicker, faster, as well as not having to wait at the airport. So we're working on a blockchain solution on Azure that basically we've done a best in class of what paperwork should go with an aircraft engine. Let's digitize that, let's put it on a chain, and then let's have a shared ledger so that we're not faxing, scanning, and all the four-letter words that drive human capital into the process. And then let's create an ability to digitally notarize that as well, so we know that that's authentic. So, and what this helps do, the outcome is that it will drive is, again, liquidity. You can sell an engine quicker, you can turn an engine quicker, and you have that authenticity, as well as you can maximize your value for something when you can prove what its origin. The other use case I'll talk about today is really a foundational one. It's similar to the gaming one that Mike mentioned, where we have a very great partner in Germany, MTU Maintenance, and we have been incubating blockchain with them for quite some time. And the use case that we have with them is very simple. They get a volume rebate for the amount of parts that are purchased over a period of time. And this rebate, it's only like 6,000 rows of data annually, but the process and the entrenchment of MTU's version of the data and GE's version of the data has resulted in GE not settling rebates going back to 3 years. Each year is worth about $10 million of cash. We have all sorts of hidden factory human capital locked up in this, where we have legal team looking at it to try to figure out how to resolve these discrepancies. We have analysts working on reconciling the data, and it takes 6 months just to reconcile and get to the source of truth, even before you have to negotiate. So putting this on a blockchain, getting a shared ledger, has really simplified things. It's made us able to settle in real time. It's a foundational use case that we can now trust the technology, and then we can refactor a lot of that architecture into other. So let me click through here. Oops. All right, so now kind of talking about those use cases I think are exciting, but the thing that I walk away from is the speed of that we've done it. We didn't partner with Microsoft until 6 months ago. And in that 6 months, we have built products on Azure that we've been able to take from concept to shippable product in weeks. And I think that's what Microsoft brings in an Azure ecosystem. I've tried startup companies as a developer myself to be the platform. I've tried AWS and had mixed results with that. But Microsoft bringing a toolkit that I can use as a developer and not have to build the hammer, the nails, and the screwdriver from scratch, and them giving the support that I need to quickly launch a product, has been awesome. And Azure as an ecosystem really thinks about all the things that you need to do to launch a blockchain product. So you think about blockchain, I joke that it's 4 stacks. You need to know the traditional software engineering back end, you need to know the front end, but in addition, you have to understand data engineering and data science to clean your data, to feed it into the chain. And on top of that, you need to know how to code Solidity to use the Ethereum framework. So it's very complicated. If you're trying to build those platforms yourself, you're gonna get lost, which we've experienced. And I think that industries kind of teaches you to want to do all that yourself. So we've outsourced that to Microsoft. They bring cutting edge technology that really helps us get to market quick, then I can focus on selling data science and blockchain solutions. So it's been really phenomenal on that front. So I think the next page is we're going to kind of wrap it up here.
Yeah, so I think, from a takeaway perspective, the key thing here that, I want you guys to take away with is, the vision piece is really, really important. As far as having a common understanding with your business professionals, bringing them into the conversation very early. I can tell you when we brought GE Aviation on site to Redmond to do a workshop, the majority of the 4 days that we spent together was actually figuring out what were the ideal business scenarios. How long did it take us to build the 2 POCs?
Yeah.
Right. The code was the easy part. The harder part was actually understanding what problem are we trying to solve here. And so understanding that vision, first and foremost, is going to be critical. And I can tell you, as an ex-Gartner analyst, so I was a VP over tech innovation and chief technology officer research. I visited over the past 18 to 24 months, did ideation sessions with executive board of director level folks, Fortune 500 companies around the world. There is an anxiety, not a fear, an anxiety around what these technologies will do and impact their business. They need your thought leadership to help them understand the capabilities that this brings to their business.
Yeah, so, Mike really touched on it. What we found in the industry, there's a fatigue. You can't start with the solution and say, here's blockchain, I'm going to sell it to you. It just doesn't work. So that's why we find that selling process improvement, and 80% of a blockchain solution is business process improvement. You've really got to understand and you've got to lean out your process. And then after that's been fixed, then you can put blockchain in as an embedded process that's kind of in the control phase. Because you could put blockchain around an existing unoptimized process today, but then you have an expensive unoptimized process that people are not going to want to use. So we found using Lean and Six Sigma tools to help us that really spoke a language to our customer base that they understand, and then they get 2 things out of it: a better process and some technology like blockchain that's embedded and becomes the process, because you can put human interactions via workflow like notarization against the operational data.
Yeah, and so the next key takeaway here that I want you guys to take away from this presentation also is, I actually don't like the term blockchain consortiums. I think it's incredibly misleading on actually what we're doing. Really what we're doing is we're creating digital ecosystems. And that's really the higher order bit. So I was doing an interview for, I think it was NASDAQ or Bloomberg, one of the two, and they asked me, what was the best blockchain solution that you've seen? I've said the best blockchain solution I've seen is one where I had no idea I was using blockchain. There's so many additional pieces to making blockchain technologies viable and actually usable. The key here is that we're in a highly distributed world. Whether you're in a closed Apple ecosystem, where that's the business strategy, or you're in an open Google style ecosystem, it's an ecosystem mindset. And so when you think about these blockchain consortiums, think about the ultimate ecosystem in which you're trying to create. If you're in the automotive field, we've got autonomous vehicles and connected cars, which will be autonomous and make decisions for us. How will that integrate with the city infrastructure, which is a real project that I'm working on right now with a company I can't talk about, but I can describe it. Where you're talking to law enforcement, your insurance company, et cetera, and it's all happening across a set of shared ledgers with AI services on top, IoT, 5G technology, et cetera. You're going to find that there's going to be a mesh of technologies that are going to enable a broader ecosystem.
Yep, thanks. And then lastly, I think the whole concept of flexibility in this industry as we launch a new technology is key. Microsoft with Azure is we have the ability to really port. We're using the Ethereum framework today. If Neo becomes the rage in 5 years and that's what the industry wants to do because we can code smart contracts in Python, then we can lift and shift that. I think that we really have to be open to collaborate and flexible with how the blockchain industry moves. In addition, you need a flexible platform that can reach into our business's legacy ERP system. So you need flexibility to get the data, and you need flexibility to evolve with the blockchain space, which we all know in a crypto world, things move very quickly.
That guys, I think we're out of time. We're going to get the hook. Thank you guys very much. Appreciate your time.
Thank you.